The 2020 election was stolen from Donald Trump.
Well, Chris, I've been very clear from the beginning. If you look at a number of states, they didn't follow their state-passed laws that govern the election for president.
So you think the election was stolen?
What I said is there are states that didn't follow their legislatively set rules.
Well, last time, I promise, do you think the election was stolen or not?
It's not just irregular. It's states that did not follow the laws set, which the Constitution says they're supposed to follow. When you see states like Georgia cleaning up some of the mess and people calling that Jim Crow law, that's a flat-out lie.
You heard that, right? This morning on Fox, the number 2 House Republican, Steve Scalise, just couldn't muster the strength to say the 2022 election was not stolen from the twice impeached loser Donald Trump. And in this moment, Scalise perfectly encapsulated the GOP. Fealty to Donald Trump based on nothing but conspiracy theories. And that can ultimately sow distrust in our government and undermine our democracy. Joining me now is Dr. Jason Johnson, MSNBC political contributor and host of the podcast From Slate, A Word with Jason Johnson, also my co-star on our IG Lives on Saturdays. Virsha Sharma, she's the editor-in-chief of Teen Vogue. Very happy to have her join the table. And Eugene Daniels with the coldest afro in all of D.C. He's an MSNBC political contributor and co-author of Political Playbook.
And that is
you guys have been all-star. I love this screen right now. I love having you both here. I want to start with Stephanie Grisham. I have spoken about the ability of these folks to be rehabilitated and sanitized time and again. Let's take a listen to what she said to my colleague on Meet the Press this morning.
When I was in the White House, I lost a lot of friends and a lot of family, and I think I lost a little bit of my own moral compass. And now leaving, you know, yes, I got paid to write a book, but you cannot put a price tag on what is happening to me now. The right is mad at me. The left is mad at me. My family is getting threats. I'm being smeared. I'm being sued. I knew all of that would happen. So when I wrote this book, I knew this was going to be a very, very tough battle.
Going to take another sip of those tears and get a little tipsy and slap it all down. Who cares, okay, that somebody's mad at the right and the left are mad at Stephanie Grisham, Virsha? I mean, look, you made this bed, you lie in it. You asked for all this smoke, now inhale it deep and choke on it. This is ridiculous. Virsha, what are your thoughts?
I think that's exactly right. I think one of the most interesting headlines to come out of Grisham's promotion of her new book is people asked her, why didn't you speak up on January 6th, right? So Grisham was one of the people in the Trump administration, Trump White House, who resigned on January 6th as this deadly riot took over the Capitol. Some people thought too little, too late. And then other people thought, okay, well, if you're resigning, why not at least make a public statement about why you're actually resigning? And people asked her to. Some people put pressure on her to. She said she didn't want to because she didn't want to make it about her on a day that people had died. And yet, I think if she'd actually taken a forceful stance that day against what was happening in D.C., she might have a little bit more
a long time ago,
or legitimacy
and that is
right
support
now. But
housing
instead, she stayed
in a real and
for several
significant
months
way,
and then wrote this book and is now trying to cash in, I think, on this rehabilitation.
I gotta say, Jason, she showed up to the game morally bankrupt for me. She knew very well who these people were. She chose to work for this campaign. She chose to work for Melania, knowing Melania was a birther. And she had the temerity to say the other day, well, Melania really isn't a conspiracy person, except for birtherism, except for standing alongside her husband the whole time being complicit. What are your thoughts here?
And the audacity of saying, oh, you can't put a price tag. Look, can you put a price tag on the hundreds of thousands of people who died of COVID in 2020 as her president decided to pick and choose whether or not red states or blue states got assistance? Can you put a price tag on all the families that were split up because of the president's Muslim ban? Can you put a price tag on the lives and the difficulties of police officers and medical workers and school teachers and abortion doctors and journalists who were attacked and had emails and everything else like that sent to them, violent death threats, all throughout the last 4 years because of this president? I have absolutely no sympathy for anybody who decides to cash in on spending 4 years with a dictatorial white nationalist president. And I do think, look, there may be some value to having conversations with people like this, but ultimately I think they should be shut out. If they want to sell books, sell books. But I wouldn't necessarily give them a platform to try and assuage their conscience in the same way that I don't like it when universities give them an opportunity to launder their reputations either.
Right, absolutely. Come do my show. You want to have a conversation, Stephanie Grisham. Let's talk about that. We'll wait for that to happen. Eugene, I want to talk about Kevin McCarthy because he was on Fox News, the only place to really go this morning, talking a little greasy about the January 6th commission. Take a listen. We'll talk about it on the other side.
Committee that is not a bipartisan committee. For the first time in history, Nancy Pelosi picked who could be on this committee. And what they're trying to do, they're missing the two main points. Why were we so ill-prepared on January 6th? And how do we make sure we'll never be in this position again? It's purely politics. And Congress does not have the right to go after mine or your phone number records. And the Supreme Court has made this ruling. It's interesting about how far they want to control and where they want to go.
Eugene, this is so clear. First of all, we know the reporting that, according to the reporting, Kevin McCarthy had that exchange with Donald Trump where he asked him, who the F do you think you're talking to? So there's a real reason why he might not want Congress to go through his phone records. What's your take?
No, absolutely. You know, House members told us that Kevin McCarthy talked to President Trump that day. And so obviously he's someone they're going to want to talk to. I think something, Tiffany, that's really important for us to always say when Kevin McCarthy or any Republican talks about this committee is that they had a chance to make it a full bipartisan committee, like an actual commission, right? You had negotiations go on with Democrats and Republicans got basically everything they wanted, and then Kevin McCarthy pulled the rug from underneath the member he sent to do the actual negotiations, right? And so every single time that Kevin McCarthy talks about this, talks about it not being bipartisan, despite the fact that there are two members of his party on the committee. It talks about the issues he has with it. He could have had a lot more involvement in it. He chose not to put people on the original commission that Nancy Pelosi wanted to do. And I think so. It's hilarious to hear him say anything about the committee because at this point it's his fault that it is not bipartisan. It's his fault that it's not an actual commission with some gravitas, which is what Nancy Pelosi wanted.
Yeah, and look, Versha, I'll have to say, I really did not care if this committee was bipartisan or not. It didn't matter to me if you had people on there who were either complicit with this president or paved the way for that former president. So what's your take on McCarthy's sound bites? I mean, clearly, like I said, he has some vested interest in keeping his communication and other folks' communication quiet.
Honestly, that clip was pretty infuriating to watch, and I completely agree with what Eugene said, and I think it's very clear to me from that clip that he is protecting himself when he starts talking about, oh, you know, big picture, I didn't think this was bipartisan, it's all a Pelosi project, but then he transitions into talking about his own phone records. Like, clearly he has something to hide, or he feels that he has something to hide there. Otherwise, he would be more cooperative with this investigation and this committee and this whole process. And so I just think it's so craven the way a lot of these Republican members are acting, from McCarthy to Scalise. And I think what stands out to me is just the ongoing denial of reality and facts that we have seen from the modern GOP that certainly didn't start with Trump, but became sort of the official party line with Trump. And even with him out of office, they have continued with that. And that seems to be their only electoral strategy, is denying reality.
Yeah, denying reality and all following this guy. Take a listen to the twice impeached loser of the 2020 election, Donald Trump, last night.
What we should have done a long time ago, and that is support housing in a real and significant way.
A $5 trillion wild spending binge that costs more than the entire sum the United States has spent on any war in the history of our country. This monstrosity is a bill to end America as we know it. It's so bad. And the Republicans have to stay strong. You have to stay strong.
Jason, I'm so bored and tired. It's a repeat. We've seen it time and again. How much longer are we going to have to watch this clown show?
We shouldn't have to watch it at all, and I don't think C-SPAN would have covered it. Unless C-SPAN is in a regular habit of covering neo-Nazi rallies and Proud Boy events and things like that, they should not be covering Donald Trump. He has not declared that he's going to run for office. He is not signed any sort of paperwork. He's under investigation by massive organizations and districts across New York and Washington, D.C. He should not be getting this level of coverage. But this is the thing. I think, Tiffany, throughout all of these sounds that we've had this this morning. You literally have people who are engaging in a slow-moving coup. And any framing of their discussions that does not say these people are trying to take over the government. These people were complicit in people who wanted to murder their colleagues earlier this year. And those colleagues included Mike Pence. Any discussion of any of these individuals without framing them as treasonous supporters of terrorism is dangerous for this country. We can't treat these guys like they just don't want to govern. We can't treat these guys like they're just a bunch of bigots who love Trump. They are treasonists. They are terrorist supporters, and they are advocates for murder. We saw that earlier this year, whether it's Mike Pence or their colleagues, and that's how they have to always be discussed.
Absolutely, and it doesn't do us in the media any favors to not call a thing a thing. We ought to speak about it bluntly like you just did. So thank you so much. You guys were a great panel. Thank you, Dr. Jason Johnson, Virsha Sarma, and Eugene Daniels. And coming up later tonight, Senator Elizabeth Warren joins my pal Mehdi Hassan live to discuss budget reconciliation negotiations, the latest on Facebook misinformation, and more. You don't want to miss that. Watch Mehdi Hassan's show tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern on MSNBC. But up next, the low